Bitcoin is hope. Okay? So let me say it a different way. If your family has $100,000 and you showed up, today, and I told you it was in a bank in Lebanon and now it's 20,000, but you can't spend it and it's going to zero, what's your family's morale?
So it's not necessarily, oh, have people disagreed with you? Because right now, also, you look like a genius. You bought the thing, the brand is up, the stock is up. If you really disagree now, that's just your own personal problem at this point. The strategy has clearly worked up till now. The question is more that, hey, we've had periods of time. I've been holding Bitcoin since 2013, 2014, and I've seen Bitcoin go down, 70, 80% drawdowns, and you have basically taken out a bunch of debt. What happens when Bitcoin price drops again? What's your reaction to that? How does that affect your strategy, or what's your overall viewpoint?
Well, we have permanent capital, so it doesn't make a difference to us, right? I can give you 1,000 reasons why I think it makes sense to invest in Bitcoin. I can't give you any reason why I should be afraid to do a rational thing.
Michael Saylor sees Bitcoin as a solution to the instability of traditional financial systems, warning against the risks of inflation and currency devaluation. He believes Bitcoin's scarcity and decentralization make it a safe long-term investment. Saylor has held Bitcoin since 2013 and views its volatility as part of its long-term potential. He encourages holding Bitcoin as a hedge against the weaknesses of fiat currencies and traditional assets. With increasing institutional adoption, Saylor predicts Bitcoin will replace traditional financial instruments like bonds, becoming a primary reserve asset. He urges both individuals and companies to invest in Bitcoin for future financial security.
So it's not necessarily, oh, have people disagreed with you? Because right now, also, you look like a genius. You bought the thing, the brand is up, the stock is up. If you really disagree now, that's just your own personal problem at this point. The strategy has clearly worked up till now. The question is more that, hey, we've had periods of time. I've been holding Bitcoin since 2013, 2014, and I've seen Bitcoin go down, 70, 80% drawdowns, and you have basically taken out a bunch of debt. The majority of the company's value is the Bitcoin the assets that it owns. And if we do see, I think we kind of agree volatility will dampen over time, but that doesn't mean we can't see a drawdown like that again. What happens when Bitcoin price drops again? What's your reaction to that? How does that affect your strategy, or what's your overall viewpoint?
I can't see any downside for the employees. They've all benefited. I can't see any downside for the investors that stayed with us. They've all benefited, right? I mean, there are critics out there that don't like Bitcoin. There are people that will say operating companies shouldn't have assets, right? There's criticism. People say, well, you're a CEO. You should go back to your cubicle and write software and leave the investing to the professionals. But I think that the fundamental elephant in the room here is that the macroeconomic environment is so incredibly unfair to people without assets. Like literally, if you're an operating company or a Main Street company, you have to work 30% harder to stand still. And if you're a Wall Street company, you can stand still and get 30% more. Like the playing field is so tilted in favor of property owners or asset holders against manufacturers and companies that do things that you can't really be successful in business unless you have assets as part of your strategy.
I want to know if we do see another Bitcoin, crash, draw down 50%, 60%, what happens to your position, and what happens to your point of view?
Well, we have permanent capital, so it doesn't make a difference to us, right? If you cut Bitcoin in half, we would still have an investment gain. But otherwise, we've got a long-term strategy, which is you buy it and hold it. And I think that a lot of people live in fear of volatility, but a lot of people live in fear of a lot of things, right? If you have enough fear, you won't leave your house, you won't do anything. And so you have to have a bit of courage and conviction. I can give you 1,000 reasons why I think it makes sense to invest in Bitcoin. I can't give you any reason why I should be afraid to do a rational thing. If I had it to do all over again, would I? Of course I would. Right? Ask all the investors that made billions and billions of dollars, over the time frame. right? Of course you would do it again.
I think for most people, a lot of what you're saying, I think, is going to be over their heads that listen to this. To be perfectly honest with you, I think, but I could distill it down into a simple way of looking at it for anybody that listened to this and they were intrigued, but they didn't know, they haven't, sort of gone down the rabbit hole yet, which is very simply, if guys like Michael Saylor, who own public companies that have a ton of money, are worried about what they're going to do because their money is melting, and they're looking for investment grade, sort of the most powerful treasury asset, and he's decided it's Bitcoin. And Square has put some money in, PayPal has put money in, Tesla's into Bitcoin. It's likely that there are more companies out there, and it'll take them 6 months to a year to make this move, but they will take a portion of their treasury reserves and they'll move it into Bitcoin. And these are long-term holders. These are not retail day traders that are going to be, buying and selling the thing like crazy.
I think it's a reasonable thing to say. I agree with it. Another big picture way to say it is there's $100 trillion of treasury assets that have a negative real yield of -10 to -15% a year. That means they're destroying $10 trillion a year of value. The solution is convert all of that money into Bitcoin.
Michael Saylor views Bitcoin as a revolutionary asset that safeguards wealth against inflation and economic instability. Its decentralized and finite nature positions it as a secure alternative to failing traditional financial systems. With growing institutional adoption, Saylor predicts Bitcoin will become a primary financial reserve asset. He urges individuals and companies to embrace Bitcoin as a strategic move for long-term stability in an uncertain economic landscape.
The real simple thing is you can sort of invest into the network. You can buy Bitcoin yourself, and you can front run the institutions that are coming. That was a very simple thesis, a very simple takeaway for somebody who's listening to this. If you're a company, you better be thinking about what you're going to do with the cash. If you're an individual person, you should also be thinking about what you're going to do with your cash. And the easy move is that for once, you get to front run the institutions and you get to get in before they all get in.
Bitcoin's $1 trillion asset. People that understand Bitcoin think it's going to grow to become the $10 trillion asset that gold is. And then it's going to replace negative yielding sovereign debt and then corporate debt. And ultimately, it will become the primary treasury reserve network and treasury reserve asset. And so if you have a company, if you're an investor, it makes sense to buy it because it's got a brilliant future and it solves a problem that everybody on earth has. And if you're a company, it makes sense to plug your treasury into Bitcoin because the road to serfdom is working exponentially harder for a currency growing exponentially weaker, right? You're just going to work yourself to death. Put yourself in a position of working as hard as you can in Venezuela or Argentina or Zimbabwe and roll the clock forward a decade and ask yourself the question, what do you wish you did? And the answer is protect your assets, protect your monetary energy, your treasury, by putting it into a scarce asset in a bank in cyberspace where no one can steal it, debase it, or destroy it. And that's the Bitcoin ethos. We're simply trying to make it worthwhile to do the other stuff. There's no point in doing 100 million other things if at the end of the journey, you've got nothing to show for it.
Michael Saylor views Bitcoin as a revolutionary asset that safeguards against inflation and economic instability. He highlights its scarcity, decentralization, and resistance to manipulation as key advantages, urging investors to act before widespread institutional adoption occurs. Despite Bitcoin's volatility, Saylor argues that its long-term potential far outweighs the risks of traditional assets in a declining economy. For him, Bitcoin is not just an investment but a critical tool for financial security in a shifting global landscape. Could Bitcoin become the primary financial asset of the future? How do you manage the risks of Bitcoin's price swings? Share your thoughts in the comments below.